I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. All right. Happy Thursday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guests tonight are Director John Kirby and producer Libby Handros. They have created the documentary called 4 Died Trying. Thank you both so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So I guess the first question I want to ask both of you, I want to go ahead and show the graphic here so people have an idea what this documentary is about. 4 Died Trying is about JFK, Malcolm X, MLK, and Bobby Kennedy. It says they fought for peace, they fought for justice, they fought for freedom, they had to go. So I guess the first question that I want to ask you is, why did you decide to create a documentary about these figures here?
John, why don't you go for that one?
Well, actually, the original impetus came from our executive producer, who had the notion, what do the children of the major assassinated figures of the 1960s think about what happened to their fathers? And actually, at first, it was going to be John Lennon, and we, in dealing with our good friend, the writer Jim Douglas, ended up realizing that we had to, of course, include Malcolm. And so Libby and I have been working on a version of this film for even years before this. We were working on a film called The War on Us, U.S, about the way in which, call it state corporate forces have the people under a form of, constant attack. So this is something this is a subject that's been near and dear to us for a long time. When we were approached with the idea, we immediately thought it was a great one, and the idea expanded because we realized we had to speak not just to the children, but to surviving witnesses, colleagues, friends, even the enemies of these 4 men, as much as we possibly could. So we've, over the course of 8 years now, gathered over 130 interviews, some of them the final interviews that people gave. So, for instance, Dick Gregory probably gave us his last interview. The comedian and activist Mort Saul gave us his last interview. Numerous witnesses, colleagues and friends. The great RFK speechwriter Adam Walensky just passed. We probably have his last interview. So we were very fortunate we knew we had to, make use of the time and the funds that we had to get as many of these interviews as we could. And a picture has emerged of all 4 of these men really in direct confrontation with the powers that be. And that was, it's quite a remarkable story once you get into it.
Yes. And Libby, I want to go to you for the next question here, because what was really interesting to me, I'm thinking about the Vietnam War with all 4 of these figures, and JFK, or excuse me, actually start with Malcolm X. Malcolm X and MLK were very much against the war in Vietnam, and they did speak out against it. Do you think it was, based on the interviews that you have conducted for this documentary, do you think it was that particular war, speaking out against that particular conflict, that ultimately led to their demise?
It certainly helped. And I would add that JFK was going to not expand the war and get us out of the war. And certainly Bobby ran on a platform of ending the war. So all four men were against the war in Vietnam. Malcolm perhaps came out the earliest against it. And I would say, yes, their stance on the war definitely helped lead to their assassinations. And also in general, their whole vision for peace. Being for peace is not good for one's longevity if you're going to be a leader on the world stage. The industrial military complex doesn't like that, and they're going to do a lot to make sure you don't get to live a long and happy, fruitful life. And I should just add another thing, by the way, this isn't just a freestanding documentary. The prologue is the first of many films that will be, this is a film series, not just one documentary.
Right. It's also interesting to me too when we think about what's happening right now with Gaza. So there was a statement recently from Bernie Sanders that said that Gaza is Joe Biden's Vietnam. Right. So if we're thinking back to who was in office during that time, which was LBJ, it's interesting that this documentary is coming out around this particular time. I don't know if that was intentional or not from either of you, or just the stars just happened to align, because there's been a lot of talk about ending the wars over the past, I would say, couple of years, but more so this year and last year. There have been a lot of politicians that have been speaking out against imperialism abroad. And I'm curious, when you look back to these four figures, and I want to put this back up on the screen for those who are just joining. When you look back on JFK, Malcolm X, MLK, and Bobby Kennedy, if they were alive today, where do you think they would stand in reference to the conflict that's happening in Gaza right now?
We wouldn't have it. It would never have happened in the first place. The world would be an incredibly different place if these four men had lived. We would not have had the war in Vietnam, which ruined the country. And from there, so many other things would have been possible. So it's almost, we wouldn't be in this situation, but I'll let John take it from there.
Well, I was going to say, so many things. I mean, think about our position with Russia, right? Vis-a-vis Russia. I mean, to imagine how brave JFK's stand on ending the Cold War was, you have to imagine if he were alive today trying to remind people that the Russians are people too, right? That's become, funny enough, that used to be a kind of a right-wing talking point, that the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. Now that's sort of gone around to the other pole. But I think that one of the most surprising things, and this relates to your question, I think one of the most surprising things we learned, for instance, about JFK was that he's not really the cold warrior that he's been painted as. Rather, he was, and this may be surprising to some people, he was a committed anti-colonialist, a committed anti-imperialist. Whether that imperialism emanated from the Soviets or from the Western powers. So, for instance, in the Senate in 1956, he stands up to make a speech against the French occupation, the French colonization, and the continued occupation of Algeria. What an incredibly brave thing to do. This angered the people at the Council on Foreign Relations and many others. He knew that the side of history was on people's self-determination, freedom, their sovereignty. He spoke in favor of African sovereignty in a way that people just don't realize. People have no idea that there were all these newly independent African nations, for instance. Northern Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, dozens of new countries were coming onto the world stage, having fought for and won their independence. Kennedy ran on the platform of chastising the Eisenhower administration for not doing anything to welcome these countries into the fold. When Kennedy got into office, well, even first as a senator, because, of course, conditions in Washington were still segregated, he became the go-to guy for African diplomats to help them find hotel rooms, okay? I mean, this is the kind of thing that JFK Senate office had to do. When he then got into office, he threw ticker tape parades and state dinners for the newly independent African leaders. When Patrice Lumumba, who he called the George Washington of the Congo, was assassinated, there's a famous picture taken of Kennedy with his head in his hands, feeling the agony of that event. The CIA, we now know, was deeply involved in that assassination. And they did it when they did it because they knew JFK was in support of Lumumba and was in support of Congolese independence from their Belgian masters and the corporate managers of all the incredible rich resources of the Congo. So throughout, I mean, he friends, whether that was with people and the people of Ghana, Tanganyika, you name it, he welcomed them and made overtures. He was an anti-imperialist. So I think that, and that extended to the Middle East. And I think that his efforts in the Middle East, if he had been allowed to continue through a second term, as Libby says, I think we'd see a much different picture. That whole area would be a much more settled place, and we would not see many of the conflicts that we've seen over the past 60 years there.
That's very interesting. One thing I wanted to mention as well, I noticed that Oliver Stone is in this documentary. That's one of the interviews that you've done. That one doesn't surprise me. I would imagine he would be in a documentary about this. He has strong opinions against the war industry as well. But also, I was surprised to see that RFK Jr. was in this documentary. And I say that not because, I mean, obviously there's two Kennedys that we're talking about here in reference to Four Died Trying. But I'm curious to get your opinion about this because RFK Jr., when he announced his campaign, he said he was running as a peace candidate. Then October 7th happened and we started to see, whoa, okay, he seems to not be a peace candidate after all, because he's saying on Twitter, give Israel everything that they need. What is your opinion about that? Considering that you interviewed him for this documentary, and I did read that JFK actually at one point in time when he was still alive, he actually did not want Israel to develop nuclear weapons. So that was an article that was released recently on Mint Press News. So I did read that recently. So it seems like a lot of the things that we've been told about JFK are obviously lacking. We're not told much about him when it comes to foreign policy, I think. Particularly in the educational system. But what is your take about this now? Considering where RFK Jr., the position that he's given in reference to Israel and the Palestinian people?
Libby,
Twitter might not have done him a favor on his policy there. I heard him speak recently, and it's a very much longer, nuanced position that he's taking. It's not just give Israel everything they want by a long shot. And I think it's people have to listen to the whole thing. He didn't do himself a favor with a Twitter post like that in a very short venue of Twitter doesn't do his policy any favors. He really goes deep and talks about both sides of it and the problems that exist on both sides, where I think he comes down in a place where there should definitely be peace. And there's a lot of players that are at fault here. It's not just the Israelis. It's not just Hamas. It's not just, you got to look to the U.S. very, very much so for a lot that's gone on in the Middle East for all these years. So I think you can't boil it down that quickly and that easily.
Yeah, and RFK Jr., obviously we interviewed him first back in 2019 and again, well before the conflict in Gaza, the recent conflict in Gaza. But as an interview, he actually, I think, has been the one Kennedy who has been willing to really look at what happened to his father and uncle. It's an incredibly painful thing. Other Kennedy family members that we interviewed became, after all these years, even so visibly upset that they couldn't really address some of the questions. So, he was, when his father was assassinated, he was old enough to understand things that were happening. Only recently did he, in the past, I'd say 10, 15 years, did he come around to looking at some of the evidence himself. And that led to him, for instance, being in support of the release of Sirhan Sirhan. He feels, as do most of the researchers, in fact, I think anyone who looks at the case, that Sirhan Sirhan was not responsible for Bobby Kennedy Sr.'s death. The famous coroner, one of them who just died, Cyril Wecht, who looked at the case along with his colleague, whose name I'm forgetting now.
Thomas Noguchi.
Thomas Noguchi lost his job, saying that, in fact, Bobby Kennedy Sr. was shot from behind at close range, and of course, Sirhan was in front of Bobby, and at least 6 feet away. So Bobby Kennedy Jr. has been very brave, looking at the issues that led to his uncle and father's deaths, and looking at the particulars of his uncle and father's death. A few other Kennedys have as well, but he did that. It took us a long time to get that first interview in 2019, but he's looked at this in a way that's it's quite something, because they many other people in the family are just like, even if they are in favor, for instance, of remediating prisons as they exist, and releasing convicted murderers in other regards, they certainly are not in favor of releasing Sirhan or looking at the details that exonerate Sirhan. So that, in other words, where Bobby Kennedy may have all kinds of, positions that, we have Roger Stone in the film. We've got all kinds of people in the film who, whose political ideas we may or may not agree with, but they're in there because they have something important to offer about the story.
Well, one thing I do just want to push back on for just a second, but it goes actually further beyond Twitter. I've seen him in a number of interviews actually not give a nuanced position. Every interview I've seen RFK Jr. in discussing Israel and Gaza, he blames it all on the Palestinians. In fact, there was an interview that he had with Breaking Points where he referred to the Palestinian people as pampered. So I have not yet seen him give a nuanced position on this particular issue. So that's why I was kind of surprised that he was in this documentary, because I don't consider him to be a peace candidate or peaceful person as he claims to be.
Well, again, Libby's seen him speak recently. I have not followed his stance on Gaza very extensively. Again, there are all kinds of people in the film who don't necessarily represent the values of RFK and JFK. Some of the people in the film are literally people who hated JFK and RFK, right? We have anti-Castro Cuban, veterans of the Bay of Pigs who think Kennedy was either a coward or a traitor. So, they're not necessarily, we're definitely not all on the same page politically, but that, Roger Stone, I think he's become a different person in many ways, but I don't think I'm on the same page politically with Roger Stone. But he's in the film. So as I say, for us, there's not, a litmus test. And of course, we did all this. We interviewed Bobby well before Gaza, so we weren't going to cut him out because he said X or Y. People can form their own opinions about what he says now, then, and later. People on the right attack Bobby because he says all kinds of, way too liberal things, going back many years. So everyone's going to have a problem with somebody, So anyway, yeah, we're just focused on the history of what happened, really, as opposed to today.
Another thing I want to bring up too, again, for those who are just joining, 4 Died Trying documentary here about JFK, Malcolm X, MLK, and Bobby Kennedy. When it comes to Malcolm X, I think a lot of times people they may not think of Malcolm X when we talk about war or imperialism, but Malcolm X was actually very much against these wars, very much against the conflict abroad. And I think a lot of times it's just not brought up, particularly even in the educational system in school. They don't really bring this up, that he was against that as well.
And in fact, he kind of picks up where JFK leaves off because of the assassination, and is working with all the leaders of the newly independent African nations to bring charges against the U.S. and the International Court of Law for racism. And it's one of the things that scared the powers that be about him. There was kind of a ticking time clock on Malcolm's life because the Big Bandung conference was coming up, and he was joining all these African leaders together, and they were going to become a powerful force against U.S. imperialism. And that was definitely one of the reasons he, as we say, had to go. And he even had an office at the UN. I mean, he was really working it hard. And he is very, as I said earlier, he comes out against the war in Vietnam very, very early 60s, when nobody is saying boo about the war in Vietnam. He is.
Yeah, no, he is a very sophisticated and complex figure with a deep humor, a deep understanding of the world. And as he goes out on his own, funny enough, because of comments that he made over the Kennedy assassination, when he goes out on his own, he really is freed to speak and to go out into different worlds that he would not have gone out into as if he stayed in the Nation of Islam. So, for instance, we've got clips of him giving an incredible performance at the Oxford Union, where he's just reeling off long sections of Hamlet as part of his argument about why we live in a time where extreme measures are called for to deal with the extremism of the powers that be. So, and he and that's in that address says, I don't care what color you are, as long as you're trying to end the horrible situation that the world is in, if you're going to work with me on that. So as soon as people start unifying as opposed to dividing, whether that's on race lines or, you're a red state person, or you're a deplorable, you're a liberal, the powers that be love that. They love to keep us divided as Republican and Demoblicon. They love to keep us divided in ways where we don't see any of our, the very many commonalities that we all have as we deal with, the war on us. If I can go back to the old title of our film, of a prior project. So that's what we have to resist, right? These efforts to make us, see our differences more than our commonalities. So that's something that, for instance, the left used to really understand, right? Especially when it came to, like, say, unionization. There was always the effort to split people along racial lines or ethnic lines. And, the unions had to overcome that to get people to realize, okay, we're all workers here. And that the same goes for us as citizens and just, humans. We need to see that we have so much more in common than they would have us believe. And that's how they win, is when we're fighting each other.
Another thing that's interesting too, again, with all four of these men in the war in Vietnam, I'm thinking about comparisons today, right? So the war in Vietnam, this was the last time they actually showed war coverage on national television, right? So after the war in Vietnam, the media said, no, we cannot show war coverage on national television again, because a lot of Americans were getting really upset, right? Like the soldiers that came back from Vietnam oftentimes weren't praised, from what I understand. They were called baby killers, et cetera. So Americans actually got to see that and add the draft to that. But Americans actually got to see that there were all these civilians overseas that were being killed. So it was not shown on national television anymore. But fast forward to today, where social media becomes into play, right? So a lot of us, I think, we have seen what has happened in Gaza. We've seen what's happened between Russia and Ukraine. Like, we've been able to see video footage on social media. So that has surpassed mainstream media. So I see a lot of comparisons between, like, Vietnam and Gaza. That being considered, why do you think more people today, considering what happened to those four, why do you feel more people today feel a little bit more empowered to be vocal about being anti-war and speaking out against these wars?
It's an interesting question. I mean, in some measure, the protests against the Vietnam War are what led to the powers that be deciding that they would never allow journalists again out in the field to cover war. They did. The Vietnam War, if you look at some of the great war correspondents who covered that and were responsible for turning the tide, the tide of the American view. So you had Sidney Schamberg, and you had David Halberstam, and you had Neil Sheehan, and you had all these reporters who they went out and they showed you what was happening. And in fact, Sony was asked to come up with very specific film cameras that were cheaper because the crews would be out in the fields and they would start being under attack, and they would just drop their really expensive cameras and run. And so it was beginning to cost a lot of money. So I think that showing the war is what helped fuel the protests. And also, as soon as the draft ended, the protests also ended. So we see it.
Go ahead.
We see it now, and as when people see it, it becomes a visceral reaction to war, and we don't want.
But I think today the only way that any of these conflicts end, including the proxy war in Ukraine, which NATO has a lot to do with starting, is if we were serious about it, we would do war tax resistance. So in other words, it's one thing to sort of set up a tent city in a college or something, and turn this into the divisive thing that it's turned into, and nobody really on the left is looking critically at the U.S. involvement in the Ukraine-Russia situation. But the only way that these things would end is if we did massive non-compliance with war taxes. So that once we're serious about this, that's what people will do. I mean, in other words, the powers that be don't care if people are yelling on a college campus. They're happy to let that happen. You can blow off steam all you want. They don't give a damn. They just they'll roll right over it. And the reason why they got rid of the draft, of course, and turned it into economic conscription, is because when you had the draft, you were taking from too many strata of society, and people who were from the middle class more in a position to object, and you formed hardcore resistance. As soon as they took away the draft, the real war resistance, the real critical analysis of the war machine disappeared in this country. So that's why the military industrial complex was allowed to continue to metastasize through 9/11 and everything else that we see, to keep the tension in the Middle East at a high boil. I mean, in other words, all this benefits, the whole thing benefits the U.S. and international war machine, because after all, these corporations are international. So you couldn't have asked for it better. You could almost think that somebody paid Hamas to do October 6th and is happy that Russia invaded Ukraine, and all the rest of it is just about tension. The ruling class loves a state of tension. They want to keep things at a high boil. The more that there's chaos, famine, misery, and war, the more they can sell their products. I had a commodities trader say that to me, that the best friend of a commodities broker is war, pestilence, and famine.
Well, one of the things I've noticed too about these four is that we haven't really had someone like that since. Mm-hmm. We haven't had another JFK. We haven't had another. I think some of us thought Bernie was going to go down that road, but no, he seems to be in with the establishment as well. We haven't had a Malcolm X. We haven't had another MLK. We haven't had another Bobby Kennedy. And it's like, after those four were killed, there was never another voice to rise up and to take that place after that. It's
Fred Hampton might have, but they killed him so young. Yep. Yeah. No, Libby, do you want to speak to that?
I mean, I think that they have found a way to keep that from happening, whether it was from assassination, so that those leaders did not grow into old age and then have proteges, whether it was from how they have manipulated the coverage of things, how they've manipulated the education system, the entertainment that we get fed. There's many factors that go into it. And after what happened with the protests and the war in Vietnam, you had the powers that be getting together and saying, this is never going to happen again.
Yeah,
they wanted to make sure that this never did happen again. And as John talked about, the fractionalization, don't let too many, as soon as you get two different kinds coming together to agree on something, they work very quickly to split it apart. They don't want too much coming together of too many disparate groups of people. And so they've worked very hard to make sure you don't get those kind of voices again. And look at the cover, look at how we get our news today. So social media also means we're very fractionalized. It's harder to bring everybody together with a central voice, because you're watching over here and I'm watching over here and John's watching over here. And maybe there's not a lot of overlap because we're also picking what we like. So we're no longer getting
a curated stream,
even if it's not the best curated stream in the world. We don't get things anymore that we're not interested in. And suddenly, how many in the old days, I remember looking at a newspaper and I'd be reading and I'd be on a page and for some reason I got stuck on that page and I wouldn't have read the article on the bottom, but there I was, and suddenly I'm reading about something I would never have purposely picked to read about.
Yeah, well, that's part of all this. I think part of what, to your question about why we haven't seen others is of their caliber. I mean, first of all, they're just rare beings. Coretta has said that about Dr. King. I mean, they were really a hard act to follow, as Bob Dylan sings in Murder Most Foul about John Kennedy. I think that one of the factors, along with many that Libby mentioned, and the sort of, because I think first of all, there's a general unconscious statement that this is what happens. I think there's a reason these men were publicly killed the way they were, right? It sends a message to everybody else. But I would say that we as a country, and by extension the world, but really as a country in particular, we have not we have not addressed how and why these men were killed. We have not really taken a look at it. And I think if we were to do that, people might be, might take heart, first of all, as painful as it is, because it is painful to realize, the state, the government that we look to for protection, or, that anything can happen. It's like there are a lot of prominent intellectuals on the left, like Noam Chomsky, for instance, who will not look at the Kennedy assassination or really any of these assassinations, or at events like 9/11. They won't address the evidence that shows government involvement. And even though they're happy to look at government involvement in, various atrocities around the world, they somehow, this is a bridge too far and they will not go there. And that's a shame, because if we could see, if people could understand, this is what Kennedy was doing, and here's how he was, for instance, trying to better the lot of the middle class and working class, and here's how he went up against the steel companies, and here's how he was trying to end the CIA, and this is what he felt needed to happen, and here's how he was trying to simmer down the tensions between the US and Russia. If we saw that, and even though he died for it, we'd say, you know what, these were the right things to be doing, and these are the things we still need to do, and it's worth risking your life to do them. And that's the other thing. It's like, if it gets diffused, it's like people are like, oh, Kennedy, he wasn't actually that good on civil rights, and he slept with all these women, and that's all people kind of maybe know. And they don't realize, oh wow, wait a second, no, this guy was super brave and doing incredibly radical things, and and that there's so much in common with him and say Malcolm, both of whom were reaching out to newly independent African leaders, for instance. It's just, it's quite extraordinary. Or or MLK. We sit there and we talk about, the I Have a Dream speech, and all of that is quite wonderful. But the fact that in the last year of his life, he after he makes the Riverside Church speech, April 4th, 1967, he comes out against the Vietnam War in what is really his best speech. And a year to the day later, he's dead. He's killed. He's shot. Now, that whole year where he's trying to bring all the different races together to occupy Washington until Congress does something about poverty, that is an incredible thing. That is an example that should be followed. That's the kind of thing we need to do and think about, as opposed to getting like hung up on, is the country, whatever, run by deplorables, or what's happening. No, we need to get together and deal with those big issues that affect us all. That's what King was doing, and that's why they killed him. So they need to hide that. There's only been one major documentary about, on HBO, it sort of addressed the last year of King's life. All the rest of it is just about the very particular civil rights years. None of it really focuses on his planned poor people's campaign and his defiance, his objection to the Vietnam War. So this is about, they killed him twice in a way. There's the first assassination, and then they knock the halo off their heads. We get, King was, we see some notes were revealed from the FBI where we see King was witness to a rape and he was laughing. I mean, it's just smearing the character of these guys, and no one again addresses what they died for and why it was so important that they knew they would risk their lives for it, and that's in fact what we should do.
Well said there. Well, 4 Died Trying. When does this premiere, and where can people watch it?
So they can watch the prologue right now on Amazon, Apple, YouTube, and various other platforms. You can watch chapter 1, which deals with the Red Scare and the Cold War, the period leading up to Kennedy's inauguration, by becoming a Patreon member. It's available exclusively to our Patreon members, and we will be releasing. We're dealing with all kinds of issues right now, including maybe suppression by platforms like Amazon. But that if people sign up for Patreon, then they'll be the first to see new chapters as they come out. So, the chapter after chapter 1, chapter 2 is going to focus on what I was talking about, Kennedy's anti-colonialism, this incredible relationship he had with Africa and the newly independent African leaders. It's going to focus on his Irish heritage, which is why he has this incredible anti-colonial sense, because he comes from a people that were under colonial domination for over 800 years. So he has a very visceral sense of that anti-colonial feeling, and that's going to be in chapter 2. So Patreon, so the prologue is available right now on Amazon and Apple, and through our website 4diedtrying.com, and then you can go on Patreon, see chapter 1, which is all about the military-industrial complex and the Red Scare, and then you'll be signed up to get the new chapters as they come out.
Awesome. Thank both of you so much. Eric, if you can put the link to that site in the chat. But thank you, John, and thank you, Libby, so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
A real pleasure. Thank you, Sabrina.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, 4 Died Trying. You can actually see the trailer on YouTube if you wanted to just get a gist of what it's going to be about. But they've interviewed, from what I understand, over 160 people. So again, 4 Died Trying. That is a documentary about JFK, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Bobby Kennedy. They fought for peace. They fought for justice. They fought for freedom. They had to go. So check that out, fam. All right. We do have other stories to discuss tonight as well. I do want to go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. We'll get into the thumbnail. We'll get into the other stories, and you're actually gonna see a nice musical treat tonight towards the end. So hang on for that, folks. You're gonna hear a nice little musical treat. Okay, let's go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really appreciate you holding the lights on around me. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, sabinators, sabsters. There's also sabbies. I gotta say sabsters kind of in that way. I don't know. It just sounds like it needs to be said that way. And of course, members, thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you. And I want to give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Michelle McConnell and Chelsea. Thank you guys so much for your support. All right. Let's go ahead and get into that beautiful thumbnail, folks. Roll that beautiful bean footage. Let's see what else we're going to discuss tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, we are discussing Bill Maher, Cringe Lies. We'll get into this little podcast tour that Bill Maher has been going on this past week. We're going to get into that and the lies that he's spreading on national platforms. We're also going to discuss Piers Morgan is schooled by Professor Morandi. That is Professor Morandi there behind him. He's been on Piers Morgan's show before, but he came back onto Piers Morgan to educate Piers again, apparently about Iran and, of course, the president of Iran that has passed away. So we'll get into that. We're also going to discuss, of course, if you have not heard about this, Antony Blinken has been confronted in a major way. We'll get into that tonight. It was not a good day yesterday for Antony Blinken, but he deserves it, right? He deserves it. And of course, director John Kirby and producer Libby was just here to discuss Four Die Trying, JFK, MLK, Malcolm X, and Bobby Kennedy, the price for peace there. We'll also have a little bit of entertainment later on in the show. So get ready for that. Let's get to some of the comments here and then we'll dive right into our first story. Shout out to Charlene Light for becoming a Sabby member. Give Charlene a big whoop whoop. Charlene, David, Sabby, Sarah Nelson. I did more research. She's in bed with politicians, works with Ted. She don't care about flight attendants. Okay. I guess we're good on Sarah. I guess we are good on Sarah. Thank you for the super chat, Tim. We need a Jill Stein. Loved her before, but once she got arrested, I said, hell yeah, fight for Palestine, Jill. I live in Miami, Florida. Can I write her in Sabs? She'll probably be on the ballot in Florida. I don't know what the write-in rules are for Florida, but different states have different rules. Some states have a certain signature threshold you have to get just to be a write-in candidate, right? So every state is different, but she'll probably be on the ballot in Florida. Thank you for the super chat, Snork. At Tim, though, Biden has been thrown off the ballot in Ohio, so everyone in Ohio would vote for Jill Stein. Biden has been thrown off the ballot in Ohio? I'll have to check that. I haven't heard about that. I would have covered that story, but I'll have to check. Thank you for the super chat, New York Varsity. In a society where people are only looking for your worst moments and make it look like that's how you are as a collective whole. Nope, no more JFKs. And thank you, Danny. Sabby, did you try that Cheeks drink yet? I did not. And no cheekity cheeks over here. All right, and let's get the comment on Rockfin. Based. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin hemp car. If I recall, Bobby's bodyguard, Caesar, shot him. Allegedly, we got to add here, reminds me of William O'Neill, Hampton's bodyguard who drugged him. We know a cop named Frank Strasser and a doctor at St. Joseph. Dr. Breen Bland killed Dr. King Jr. Again, allegedly. SOG and MIG also killed King Military Intelligence Group and Special Operations Group. Thank you for this as well. Cornell West calls it the Santa Clausification of Dr. King. They erase beyond the Vietnam speech and the one on being maladjusted. His last sermon was going to be why America may go to hell. The Poor People's Campaign erased. I asked the librarian at my college to cover that in their display, and she said, well, that's not happy. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me as well. Thank you for this as well. It's about television's refusal to show the truth of war. Robert Fisk said on Democracy Now! He said he was with ITV British Channel and they got out on the highway of death and filmed dogs eating corpses. And he asked why they won't show it. They said, no, it's just for the archives. Should be a hint as to what to show. Thank you so much for that. I'll have to check that out as well. If you were just joining me, don't forget to smash that like button, folks. Thank you very much. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we're going to jump into our first story here. So Professor Morandi has to educate Piers Morgan once again. You have to remember Professor Morandi is from Iran, lives in Iran, teaches at Tehran University, but somehow, for whatever reason, Piers Morgan seems to think that he knows more about Professor Morandi's own country than Professor Morandi does. So, of course, after the death of the president of Iran, Here's Piers Morgan thinking he knows it all. Let's jump right in.
First of all, your reaction to the death of the president yesterday.
Obviously, everyone that I know is in mourning. He was a very popular figure. He was a very humble person, very different from the description that you gave. He worked very hard for the deprived, the working class, the disenfranchised. He traveled from city to city, from town to town. He was constantly visiting the different provinces. And that's why he was so popular among, especially, as I said, the more disenfranchised and middle class, lower middle class Iranians.
I mean, you've painted what many would view as a ridiculous picture of a man dubbed the Butcher of Tehran, somebody whose death was greeted by many women posting images of themselves celebrating his death because of the appalling suppression that he put them under. And we know that he was responsible for the deaths of many thousands of political prisoners. So I don't quite categorize him as the person that you're trying to describe to us.
Pause for just a second here. So I do want to chime in for just a second. I did interview Professor Morandi. I did talk to him about the concerns that have come from some women that are either from Iran or are still in Iran. I can tell you there are people that I know who I will not name here, but there are women that I know that are from Iran and they are not happy with the current regime in Iran. I could send them the interview that I did with Professor Morandi, but it's honestly gotten to the point where for me, it's not worth my time to try to push back against that argument anymore, because it has been made very clear to me that they are not going to change their position about this particular issue. So sometimes I just let things be as they are, right? But I think what Piers Morgan tends to do is when it comes to certain countries, right? When it comes to Iran, when it comes to Gaza, right? He tends to try to elevate the worst, right? So he tends to focus on the most horrible things that people have said about that group of people. But if you notice, he won't do that with Israel. He will ignore that when it comes to Israel. He'll only focus on, well, do you condemn Hamas, right? So you have to understand what Piers Morgan is here to do and what is his role. His role is to make sure, again, that he is going to uplift the state of Israel. And any country or any group of people that is a threat to that, or what the West perceives to be a threat to that, he is going to try to smear. This is important for people to understand. You got to know where Pierce's checks are coming from. But Professor Morandi responds.
Well, obviously, what you're saying is inaccurate, to say the least. I would say the butchers are in London, in Washington, the people who destroyed Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen during the disgraceful genocide there, the dirty war in Syria, the destruction of Libya, the sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba. I think that the real monsters are actually much more closer to home. He was a part of the judiciary, and those people that you were saying were executed were, he wasn't executing people. He was in the judiciary at the time, and the people who you're alluding to, and the numbers are far less than what you claim, they're actually, this is something that your government should be ashamed of. These are people who fought against Iran. They fought for Saddam Hussein as foot soldiers. They betrayed the country. They carried out bomb attacks in this country, killing up to 17,000 people, including a president, a prime minister, and a head of judiciary. A bomb explosion near my house when I was a school student. I was getting ready to go to school. It killed 9 to 11 people, including an Armenian family of 4. These are the people who you're saying they were murdered by Iranians. No, in Iran, no one has any sympathy for the MEK terrorist organization, which today has a major base in Albania, and it has offices across Europe and North America. So it is your government that's supporting terrorism. It is your government and your governments that are really the brutal regimes that the
Professor, you came on and said.
Let me start here. Not even just his government, but the West in particular. It is the West that continues to, bomb these countries, right? To starve these countries, putting sanctions on these countries. It's the West that tends to do these things. This is why people like Tulsi Gabbard and her crazy ass, I guess I should say her flip-flopping ass. This is why she always comes up. She just pops up all of a sudden when people tend to speak out against Israel, right? And they're speaking out in support for the Palestinian people. And they're starting to do their own research, and they're starting to realize, wait a minute now, some of these countries that our history books told us were evil and bad. Now that I've done my own research and I've looked into these countries myself, I've started to realize something. It was the United States. It was the West that made these countries what they are, that attacked these countries, that stole from these countries. It was the West that starved these countries by implementing sanctions on the people. It was the West that stole their oil. It was the West that has been terrorizing these countries for years. And that's when you see people like Tulsi Gabbard pop up and say, I've been trying to warn people about the danger of Islam and the spread of Islam and how it's gotten to our American kids, our innocent American kids. That's where people like her pop up. That's what they use people like Tulsi Gabbard for. But Tulsi Gabbard knows damn well, especially since Tulsi Gabbard is also a soldier. Tulsi knows what's really happening in those countries. Tulsi knows what the West has done, but Tulsi Gabbard is paid to lie about that. Tulsi Gabbard is paid to tell you the opposite. And that's why a lot of people are in those positions that they're in government right now.
You came on and spun this sort of stuff last time with the same smirk that you're doing it with this time. And the reason I find the smirk so irksome is because everybody actually outside of your office right now is looking at this thinking, is this guy for real? Given that Iran's tentacles in terms of terrorism are very transparently flowing through the three H's, as I described them. Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas. We know that your country, Iran, through its regime, has been responsible for horrendous terrorism now for a very long time. Why do you expect people watching these interviews, when you do them, to just calmly believe you when you say that all the bad guys are everybody else and the downtrodden, oppressed, much misunderstood people are the Iranian regime that is despised by so many people in Iran itself?
No, and Iran will see during the funeral ceremonies how popular President Raisi was. Just like General Soleimani 4 years ago, people like you were saying the same thing about him. But we saw millions come to the street. Just because in the West you say this sort of thing doesn't mean that that's the reality on the ground over here. Hezbollah was a group that was created as a result of the Israeli regime's invasion of Lebanon. They went and captured the capital in 1982. Hezbollah was created as a result of this illegitimate and brutal occupation. They expelled the brutal apartheid ethno-supremacist regime from Lebanon. And Hamas and other groups in Palestine are the result of 76 years of oppression, ethnic cleansing, and brutality and apartheid from this same regime.
There it is. There it is. There it is, folks.
So when you speak about the Houthis or Ansar Allah, you're talking about a decade of genocide carried out by the Saudis and the Emiratis, who are your allies, and your governments were supporting them. Your government starved the people of Yemen to bring them to their knees, but you failed, and you failed today as well. So no, you cannot blame the victims. 9/11, we were told that Al-Qaeda carried out the attacks on the Twin Towers. Who was Al-Qaeda? They were working with you in Afghanistan. And then 10 years later in Syria and in Libya, Al-Qaeda was cooperating with you. We have an email from Jake Sullivan, February the 12th, 2012, where he sent to Hillary Clinton, where he said, in Syria, Al-Qaeda is on our side. The dirty war in Syria, the dirty war in Libya is yours. These are your crimes, and you cannot escape from it. So we are the victims, and your ugly empire is guilty as it is guilty in the genocide today in Gaza.
Ouch. Talk about telling Piers Morgan off to his face with just straight facts, man. He didn't have to call Piers any names. He didn't have to, yell at Piers. Notice how Professor Morandi is incredibly calm when he spits these facts towards Piers Morgan. And by the way, Piers Morgan knows some of these things. Again, his job, he is paid to uplift, obviously, the state of Israel and to smear Muslim countries, to smear actually anyone outside of the West. That's what he is. The Piers don't care about nobody. Like, come on. That's what he's there for. I told you this before. Working with Talk TV, you got to think about who owns Talk TV. That's Rupert Murdoch, same guy that owns Fox, right? Fox News. So again, also Rupert Murdoch, also proud Zionist. So you guys, like, this is all connected. He's not going to let someone come host this show that's saying, yay, free Palestine. That's why he's there.
I wonder how many people watching this around the world, and there'll be a lot, will look at the situation with the current Iranian regime and think the word victim is appropriate. And particularly given that President Raisi, that you paint such a idyllic picture of as a human being, somebody who only cared about the downtrodden. This is a man, of course, ordered tighter enforcement of Iran's hijab and chastity law, restricting women's dress and behavior. It was under those orders that 22-year-old Mahsa Amini was detained in September 2022 by Iran's morality police for wearing improper hijab and died 3 days later in hospital, sparking mass unrest. That doesn't sound like the kind of guy you're trying to describe to me. It sounds like a guy who is trying to dictate to women how they should dress, how they should behave. Do you understand that in the West, we look at that as reprehensible behavior?
So this is a question. This is something I did talk to Professor Morandi about. Is towards the end of our interview, I did talk to him about what are the laws in Iran for women, and are they required to wear the hijab and things like that. I also talked to him about the woman that Piers Morgan is referring to, and there were some things that Professor Morandi revealed to me about that particular individual that I had not heard. There was obviously some information that was left out of that story. Because after I had that interview with Professor Morandi, I did some research on my own too. And I was like, oh, well, there you go. I didn't know that, So this is how we learn. Doesn't mean I agree with all the laws and the rules. I don't believe there should be any religious state. I believe in separation of church and state. I don't believe that people should, have to be a part of a certain religion because of where they live. I feel like people should have the freedom to choose. I don't feel like the laws should be aligned with religion. I don't believe that. Right. So that's me. But I don't live there. That's my take. Listen to this, though.
No, in the West, you objectify women, you commodify women, and you sexualize women, and you have Epsteins and many Epsteins who control.
Well, we give women the freedom to dress how they wish.
Notice when he mentions Epstein, that's when he comes in. Watch.
Fucking mass unrest. That doesn't sound like the kind of guy you're trying to describe to me. It sounds like a guy who is trying to dictate to women how they should dress, how they should behave. Do you understand that in the West, we look at that as reprehensible behavior?
No, in the West, you objectify women, you commodify women, and you sexualize women, and you have Epsteins and many Epsteins who control.
Well, we give women the freedom to dress how they wish. Why would you decline them that freedom?
In Iran, we have.
Notice that he happened to cut him off when he mentioned Epstein.
Women pilots, we have women scientists. My boss at the University of Tehran, the dean of my faculty, is a woman. For the 21 years that I've been an academic at the University of Tehran, 17 and a half of those years, the dean of my faculty was one woman or another. Don't misrepresent Iran. It doesn't work anymore, Piers. Your Western empire is on the decline. The whole of the global South is witnessing the crimes that are being carried out by your regimes. And your declining regimes are now despised by your own people. You're crushing people, students who are protesting genocide. You're not even crushing students who are protesting your own government. for something that they're doing at home. You're crushing students for protesting genocide in another country. But you can't tolerate that. And your media is controlled by a group of rich people. They control the narrative, and you call that a democracy. Your choice is either Hillary Clinton or Biden or Trump. And then when that decision is made, the whole of Europe, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand fall in line as good soldiers. You don't have democracies, so don't pretend that you are above Iran.
Out of interest, Professor.
You owe us.
Out of interest.
You owe us.
Out of
Yes.
interest. Do you think?
And what's funny is after everything that he says, there's like a smile. Like, I'm going to come back with that. The Oracle says, do I hear the professor to be telling Piers, yo, lies ain't working now? No, it's so true. Oh, my God.
Women should have freedom to dress how they wish?
That is not your concern.
I'm asking you a
That is-
question. I'm asking you a question.
That is not your concern.
Do you have
Yes,
an answer for me or not?
women should have a freedom to dress within
How
the
they wish?
cultural within the cultural context of every society. Women and men do not have the freedom to dress any way they like in your country. So different societies have different cultures.
Actually,
and
we
you
do.
have to,
I can dress how the hell I like.
well, no, you cannot. You can then take off your clothes right now in front of the camera. Don't talk nonsense.
I can take my clothes.
Don't do it. Keep those clothes on. But no, it's I mean, technically, no, we don't have the right to dress however we wish, right? There are dress codes, right? Some of you work at a job, you work for certain companies where there is a dress code where you may have to wear business attire, right? Like I couldn't, even in my, when I was still working at university, I couldn't just show up in a bathing suit. Like, like we do have rules. We do have dress codes as well. So, but no, Piers, keep the clothes on. Keep them on.
Off if I wanted to.
Every society has its own culture. We don't follow.
But just to be clear, I mean, you're trying to avoid the question. Just to be clear.
I'm not.
Well, just
No, I'm
let me
not.
ask you the question again. You're a smart guy. You're a professor, and you're
no.
full of the ills of the West. Do you think women should be free to dress how they like?
No, I told you. I told you very clearly.
You don't agree.
Women should have the freedom to dress the way they like, but in our culture, the sexualization, objectification, and commodification of women is unacceptable. It is your society that drives and pushes women.
Got
in
it.
that
No,
direction.
I'll get you another lecture about my society. But just to be clear, what you mean is you would like
in
to
our
just,
society,
you don't think they should, do you?
Women are pilots. Most of my university students are women. The last person who we hired in my department was a woman. I am an affiliate in another department as well at the University of Tehran. The last two people we hired as academics there are women too. You cannot misrepresent Iran.
I simply asked you, Professor, if you felt women should have the freedom to dress how they wish, and you cannot answer me because actually you don't think they should.
No, because I didn't. They should be free to dress as they like within the cultural and religious context.
And just to be clear, just one moment. And just to be clear, okay, you can keep shouting or you can answer my question. Just to be clear, that would be within the realm of Iran's hijab and chastity law, would it?
I don't know the precise law, and I'm not going to get involved in that debate. That's
But it was President Raisi who tightened enforcement of that law. So you must be aware of it. You're a professor. You're a very smart guy.
No, actually, I hope you're smart too. Mr. Raisi did not tighten the law, or he didn't enforce it.
You just said you don't know anything about the law.
No, I don't know that.
You either know about it or you don't. Sounds like you're very well informed.
So let me jump in here. Let me break something down, right? So apparently this is a religious issue, right? So again, Professor Morandi explained this to me via interview. The culture that is in Iran, obviously, like they have a certain dress requirement or whatever for women, etc. It is what it is. But I will also say there are groups in this country that have the same rule. It may not be, hijab, but the Amish. So women that are Amish, they are not free to dress however they want unless they leave the Amish community, right? I told you guys when I was growing up back in the day for 1 year, and it only lasted 1 year. 1 year, I went to a Pentecostal church. We didn't have the freedom to dress however we wanted to. We had a very strict dress code. I told you guys about this on the call-in after show. We couldn't wear pants. We couldn't wear jewelry. We couldn't wear makeup. I told you it didn't last that long. So I had to go. Anywho, there are different religions, different organizations, some people call them cults in this country, that also have those same restrictions where you cannot just dress freely however you want to. So to that point, I don't hear Piers Morgan giving the same message to the Amish community. I don't hear Piers Morgan giving the same message to the Pentecostal community, depending on the type of Pentecostal. Some Pentecostal churches let women wear pants, but the one that I went to did not. I don't hear him giving that same type of thing, right? There are some, groups or organizations or religions in the country where even your hair is an issue. When I was at the Pentecostal church, we weren't allowed to cut our hair. So it's always kind of thing. So where's that same, that same energy for those religions as well?
I know you're trying to escape the argument.
Actually, no, I'm just trying to ask you a simple question. The truth is, this guy you're trying to paint as some kind of saint, right, was somebody who led a draconian enforcement of how women in Iran dress, and that led to a young woman who was being detained by your morality police, and because she was wearing an improper hijab, and she died in hospital 3 days later, sparking mass unrest where more people got punished. That's the reality of this utopia you paint in Iran. It's a place that actually, far from encouraging women to be these great champions, as you put it, actually wants to suppress and control them. And that was led by President Raisi. But anyway,
you want to keep talking. You want to keep talking because you want to run out the clock, because we know quite well, and so do you, that your regime and your governments are the ones that are destroying our part of the world. And you're
Pause there for a second. That's a good point from Professor Morandi, but from Vatter Girl, braids and dreads still not allowed. Even in some of the school systems, we talked about this a couple of months ago. There were remember the kid in, I think this was Texas. Remember the kid in Texas that was suspended because he had braids in his hair? So it's not as free as Piers is trying to make it sound. We have restrictions here too. I told you guys again, America is a conservative country. America is not left. It's not progressive. There are progressive people, right? There are people who identify as socialists, but as a country, America is actually pretty conservative. If you travel across this country, you'll see it. You'll see it.
You're speaking about a law in Iran that most people accept, and that it is part of a different culture than yours.
Yeah.
But you think that our society and all other societies have to behave like yours. And that's not necessarily the case. And you think that necessarily because a woman wears a headscarf, that woman is somehow intellectually less, or that she's oppressed. That's your ignorance. I didn't say that. That is your ignorance.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
But women,
if a woman, let me be very clear to you. If a woman chooses to do that, that's fine. It's the idea of people like you endorsing a law that orders them to dress in a certain way. I find objectionable.
Because in the West, increasingly, women who have hijab are being sidelined. They're losing their jobs, whether it's in France, whether it's in England, and in other parts of Europe. So don't pretend that this is not the case. But in any case, women in Iran, whether they wear a headscarf or not, most of the university students in Iran are women, and women in Iran know how to deal with their rights much better than you. We don't need you, your government, and your filthy.
Is that why they all take to the streets to protest against the regime?
You will see.
Am I imagining things again?
You will see women take to the streets during the funeral. And then I will wonder, how are you going to explain that away? Or is it North Korea and how the evil mullahs are forcing people to come to the streets?
Yeah, there's a lot of that, yeah. A lot of that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what
there is, yeah. When you have a morality police, you get told what your morals should be and how to behave. That's the point of a morality police. Anyway, we've run out of time.
So Piers, does Piers Morgan say anything about the women that have been fired from their jobs because they wear a hijab in the West whether it's the UK or whether it's the United States, does he say anything about those women then? No. So something else I wanted to show you. We're going to play a little bit more here, and then I want to show you the funeral procession for President Raisi, because Piers was earlier on in this conversation. Piers was saying that obviously people were cheering that he has died. I want to show you what is actually happening.
We've run down the clock because I've given you more time than I intended to, Professor.
Just one final point. You have never been to Iran.
No.
You know nothing about Iran.
But I know many people who have.
No, you've never been
and
to Iran.
last time you came on this program, you tried to pretend that the regime has the widespread support of Iranian people. It doesn't. It doesn't.
Well,
if that is believed, as many as 80% of Iranian people loathe and despise your totalitarian regime.
In your wild dreams, that's the case. But you're the same person who gives a voice to the genocidal regime of Israel, and you advocate the devil.
Okay. Well, we're going to have a member of.
I wanted you to at least hear to that part, because that was hilarious. And look at the big smile on his face. He said, "You advocate the devil." I'm sorry. I thought it's awesome. You can watch the full exchange on Piers Morgan's channel. But I do want to show you something else. Professor Morandi did post this on X here. He said, "This is Tehran right now, Piers. The funeral procession is so enormous that I can't get anywhere near the places you see in the video. I don't see people celebrating. Do you have the intellectual integrity to admit you were completely wrong?" So let's look at this here. I'm keeping it on mute because it has music, but you can see here. So this is the funeral procession for President Raisi in Iran. And so Piers was saying that people in Iran were cheering after President Raisi died. But remember, Professor Morandi is actually in Iran. So he's able to get this footage for us, right? So he's there. So he's just showing you, like, look at all these people. Look at all these people. That's a lot, huh? Yeah. That's a lot of people. Lot of people. And see, Western media is probably not going to show you this, because Western media, they don't want you to see how many people actually came to the funeral procession. They don't want you to see that, right? So that's interesting for people to see. And then it wasn't just Professor Morandi. Richie Medhurst also, he was able to show some of the footage there as well. I'm at President Raisi's funeral in Tehran. Millions of people are in the streets. President Putin and Ismail Haniyeh have also come to pay their respects. Whatever Western media told you about Raisi being disliked in Iran is a lie. His passing is a loss for the entire world. So I just want to show this to you guys. So again, this is Richie Medhurst was there. So you see all the people. So Piers Morgan doesn't want you to see this. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is why you can't just listen to, this is why we have to do our own research. Luckily, we know people that are there, that are in the region, right? So again, debunking the propaganda from mainstream media. Have to continue to do that. That is my goal. That is my goal. Let's get to some of the comments here. Thank you, Tim, for the super chat. Yeah, right, Sabs. Tucker interview with Putin was, dare I say, refreshing. First time DNC's fear-mongering was out the window. Putin seemed measured. Yeah, it's interesting how, a lot of these leaders of other countries is like, once you start to do your own research, once you actually talk to people in that country and not just listen to the puppets of Western media, you start to see things differently. Thank you, Tony. Says, Sabby, thank you for trying. And thank you, Penny. Tentacles of Terror. Piers gobbles Morgan. Rich says that Piers Morgan's net worth 20 to 30 million. Billionaires control millionaires who control the narrative. This is true. Yeah, right. And Rupert Murdoch is a billionaire. So he is controlling the millionaire, Piers Morgan. Thank you, Harmony. Thanks so much. You are welcome. Thank you, Old Crow. He gave him that work, good Lord. He gave him that work, good Lord. Did you mean good Lord? What's going on? Pastor Wheeler says Pierce went into error. LOL. Let me get back to my computer. LOL. Yeah. Thank you, Unemployed Scholar. Westerners for years have spread the idea that Eastern women are oppressed. There's some issues, but the West uses this to destroy Eastern societies by attacking the men every time, every damn time. Thank you, Tim. Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself from the people they're occupying, period. And yes, the Crown Act because of hair. Freedom, LOL, yeah, for the rich. What's up, Piano Man says, hello, I caught Sabs on. We love your show. Hello, Piano Man. Sing us a song, you're the Piano Man. Sing us a song tonight. I like that song. Thank you, Tony. I see now many white men Oprah has made who despise her. Oh, Tony, we didn't even get into Oprah tonight. Thank you, Ronwell. Piers, how about you go to Iran to see for yourself? Yeah, it's always funny, right? When a commentator or someone, just anyone in general, who is trying to tell the person who lives in that country what is happening in their own country, and they're there. It's just like, I don't know. Sing us a song tonight. All right, let's get to our next story, folks. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we are going into this story about Antony Blinken. He did not have a good day the other day. And that's thanks to many activists that are part of Code Pink that decided to show up and give Antony Blinken a piece of their mind. They actually caught him walking into the congressional hearing. So they got mad skills for this one. Shout out to Medea Benjamin says, Butcher of Gaza, Secretary of Genocide, Bloody Blinken, war criminal. This is how we greeted Secretary Blinken as he left this morning's congressional hearing. And I'm going to tell you something else about his past too when we get to the end of these clips. But check this out.
Butcher of Gaza, war criminal, Bloody Blinken.
They called him Butcher of Gaza. They called him Secretary of Genocide. Yikes. Antony Blinken, this is what he's going to be remembered for, guys. This is what he will go down for in history. He will be known as Butcher Blinken. Yes, the Secretary of State does bear responsibility when it comes to genocide, particularly since He's totally fine with this. If he's not totally fine with it, he's saying that he is, which is also problematic. There's also this clip here that I want to play as well. This is from Code Pink as well, still on it. Jake Shields said Anthony Blinken was interrupted multiple times today while giving a speech in support of genocide. So it says Blinken disrupted multiple times. Police brutally repressed protesters. The blood of 40,000 people is on his hands. Give him hell.
40,000 people. There's not in hand. That's what? 40,000 people. There's not in hand. Blinken is a war criminal. We need money.
Charged with resisting arrest if you do not stop.
We're
murdering innocent Palestinians. Genocide is your legacy.
Jesus, look at that. I've already beaten people up and there's shame on you.
Secretary of Genocide.
Calling him Secretary of Genocide. Like he will never live this down.
War criminal. Tens of thousands. War criminal.
What an embarrassment to international law.
Genocide enabler.
How sick.
Complicit in genocide. War criminal.
The blood of 40,000 Palestinians is on your hands.
War criminal. Enabling genocide in Gaza.
The blood of 40,000
Murderer.
Palestinians is on your hands.
Butcher Blinken.
War criminal.
Butcher Blinken. War criminal.
War criminal.
The blood of over 40,000 Palestinians is on your hands.
Oh, and from what I understand too, they have also been protesting outside of Anthony Blinken's house. So it's not just when he appears at these congressional hearings. This has been following Anthony Blinken everywhere he goes in DC, and rightfully so. You shouldn't get to say this. You shouldn't get to eat in peace, Anthony Blinken. You shouldn't get, I don't care. I don't care if you're at a restaurant. I don't care if Anthony Blinken is going to the movies. He should not be able to watch that movie in peace. He should not be able to eat his dinner in peace out in public. Once you're out in public, you're out in public. Free reign. He should not be able to have a moment of peace. Not at all. And I want to remind you, Anthony Blinken can resign at any time. Let me say this, folks, for people say, well, that's his job and that's what he has to do. No. Anthony Blinken, even though he was appointed by Joe Biden, he can resign at any time. He can step down at any time. If this is bothering him this much, and as he said, oh, his kids are bothered as well, Anthony Blinken can resign. And he can easily get another job. He'll have a book deal. Probably already has a book deal in the works. He'll be fine financially. But this is about Anthony Blinken trying to maintain the status that he has in the social circles in DC.
Bloody Butcher Blinken. Genocide is your legacy.
The Senate Foreign Relations Committee come to order.
Pursuing Russia was 6 years old when Israelis killed her. Hit Russia was 6 years old. Blinken,
Everybody step back, move back, everybody back.
we're murdering innocent Palestinians.
So he's talking about Hind Rajab, right? So that was the little girl. She was 6 years old. That was actually the hall that was at Columbia University. They renamed the hall after her. Yeah.
It's your legacy. Genocide is your legacy.
Jesus, look at that. I've already
The person,
After murdering
will the officer please remove the person who's making these comments?
Bloody Blinken.
If anyone who's speaking, please be removed.
Ma'am, put your sign down.
This is how they treat innocent Palestinians. This is how they treat innocent Palestinians in a genocide.
So and they said that woman there was a senior. So let's give it up for, our elders, right? Those that have been activists. And a lot of the people that you meet in Code Pink, they've been activists for a long time. It's not something they just started doing, like when they joined Code Pink. Like Medea Benjamin has been, Medea Benjamin has stood in front of tanks. So these people have been actors for a long time, but always make sure we give it up for, the elderly, like the seniors that are out there, like putting themselves on the line like that, right? Because honestly, when you get to a certain age in your life, you really don't have to do that. And I know a lot of people that have been activists before when they were younger, as they've gotten older, like they just don't want to participate in that anymore because they don't want to risk, harm to their self, right? And a lot of them will not continue to do it once they get a certain age. So we always got to give shout out to the seniors that are still out there on the front lines.
They're beating people up and you're done wrong on my bloody arm that the police have already done right there. You're right on.
You need medical attention.
Yes, I do. I need it on this arm right here. It's already bleeding. And don't put them tight because it's going to blood all over your white shirt. Genocide of Blinken. Genocide of Blinken. Yeah, the cops are beating people up in there. They're dragging people out by their arms. The people are bleeding in there.
I was saying, the People's Republic of China.
War criminal. He is a war criminal. The blood of 40,000 people is on his hands. The blood of 40,000 Palestinians is on his hands. He is a war criminal. He is a war criminal. Blinken is a war criminal. The blood of 40,000 people is on his hands. The blood of 40,000 people is on his hands. Blinken is a war criminal. We need money.
Resisting arrest. You do not stop.
We need money for health care and housing and employment. The blood of 40,000 people is on Blinken's hands. We are aiding and abetting genocide. Shame on you. The blood of 40,000 Palestinians is on his hands. The blood of 40,000 Palestinians is on his hands.
The President's FY25 budget.
Funding of genocide in Gaza. There have been 7 mass graves outside of hospitals. This is sick. This is deranged. You are a war
I love this because every time he tries to speak, they interrupt him.
criminals. Shame on you.
I am very arrested.
step back
I
around the
brought
corner.
up the war crimes that Anthony Blinken is committing, including the 7 mass graves that have been found outside of hospitals, which has historically been used as evidence of a genocide.
Yeah. So they did the damn thing there, confronting Anthony Blinken. Again, just another war criminal. And there's actually, is this the one I wanted to show? Oh, there's actually another close-up one I wanted to show you too, where it says, Blinken, you're a butcher. So you can see close-up reaction of Anthony Blinken.
16,000 kids dead! 16,000 kids dead! You're a butcher! I'm not resisting! You're a butcher! You will stand up against the genocidal animal! He is a genocidal animal! There's a criminal there. There's a criminal there. Guys, there's a criminal. There's a criminal in there.
What's interesting? It's true when he says there's a criminal in there. And that's something I wanted to talk about with this video. There is a criminal in there. The police are arresting, the protesters who are not the criminals. The real criminals are the ones in suits. It's the Anthony Blinken. It's Joe Biden. It's Lloyd Austin. It's Matt Miller. It's John Kirby. Those are the real criminals. Those are the people that the police really should lock up. Isn't that interesting?
War criminal! 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 Go to hell, Blinken! Blinken, go to hell! Go to hell!
People are being forced to carry their parents' limbs. It's babies.
Committee will suspend while the Capitol Police restore order. Committee will suspend.
You are a killer. No one will ever forgive you. I'm being arrested for protesting a literal murderer. This is absolutely unacceptable. We're just protesting. All I said was that he's doing what he's doing. He is a war criminal. The blood is on his hands. Children are being caused to carry their their parents' limbs and their siblings' bodies in their backpacks to hospitals. I told him this and he won't listen to me. I'm not going to stop talking. I don't care. Like, the only thing that matters is that children in Gaza are being lost. They're being starved. Everything that they have is being taken from them, and they're acting like they care about the children. I've watched him say that he is taking it seriously, that children are being robbed and that they're being starved. He doesn't. He's the one doing this. If he really cared, he would stop sending bombs to Israel. It's absolutely unacceptable. They don't represent us. AIPAC is funding this. I am Jewish, by the way. He's acting like what he's doing is at all acceptable, that it is at all helping people. Biden can say all they want, but the only thing that matters is that they're continuing to send bombs to Israel, who continues to use those bombs on children, on babies, on family members, on parents, on people who didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah. So very powerful things there. And she's right when she says AIPAC is supporting this, is funding this, etc. And I want to go ahead and bring up this part here from Lee Camp, because there's something else. He talks about how pathetic Antony Blinken is when he's forced to answer tough questions, right? Or what he may deem to be tough questions. So Lee Camp is here. He says the Secretary of State is pathetic trying to answer this question. So watch this.
And we've laid out in some detail why we see the genocide being perpetrated. Similarly, including very recently before the International Court, we had an opportunity, and others have had an opportunity to make clear why that is simply not the case when it comes to Gaza.
He hasn't said anything. Literally, the guy said, why do you see genocide with Uyghurs and you don't see genocide with Gazans? And his response was, we laid out why we saw genocide with Uyghurs, and now at the ICJ, we laid out why we don't see genocide with Gaza. That's not an answer. You literally just repeated what he asked you, basically. Of course Gaza's genocide, and of course the Uyghurs are not. Like, it is so breathtakingly stupid.
Not to mention, when I covered that over a year ago, I actually showed you what the State Department's website said about the Uyghurs. And the State Department actually said that they could not, I guess, in good faith, say that there was a genocide of the Uyghurs based on the evidence that they found. So there's that. So all of these people, these State Department people and people like Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, that are willing to say that there was a genocide with the Uyghurs, but they won't say that there's a genocide of the Palestinian people. You already know what's up, right? You already know what's up. They're willing to admit, they're willing to say, yes, there's a genocide with the Uyghurs, because that puts the blame on China, and that makes Xi Jinping look bad, which that is their enemy. They see China as enemy, but they don't want to say that about the Palestinian people, because that would put the responsibility on Israel, and they don't want Israel to be their enemy. They want to continue to be allies with Israel. And honestly, if you're a politician in DC, you've already bought into it, whether you didn't want to buy into it, because both of those parties are controlled by the Israeli lobby. So when you have organizations like AIPAC and J Street, and they've bought up all these politicians and things like that, you're already a part of it, even though you may not want to be a part of it.
What do they think? We're children? Don't answer that question. The answer is yes. They think most Americans are children and will believe this garbage, and many Americans do.
Yeah. So that was a good point that Lee Camp brought up there about how Antony Blinken did not know how to answer that question. And there's something else I want to show you about him, too, in reference to foreign policy, because this isn't a new thing with him. I think a lot of people are just not familiar with his past. So I brought this up from Politico. It said 9 things about Antony Blinken, the next U.S. Secretary of State. So this is when Joe Biden had chosen him. I want to go down to foreign policy. So let's drop down here. Make sure I go to the right one here. This part right here of interventionists. You see, Politico wrote this article years ago, but we may not have been paying as much attention to it at that point in time. Check this out, folks. Interventionists. In his roles in the NSC under Obama And as Deputy Secretary of State, Blinken advocated for more robust U.S. involvement in the Syria conflict. Highlight Syria. And notably broke with his boss Biden to support the armed intervention in Libya. He was also a close aide to Biden when the then senator supported the U.S. invasion of Iraq. He continues to believe that diplomacy needs to be supplemented by deterrence, and force can be a necessary adjunct to effective diplomacy. So you see this? This is who Antony Blinken always was. Neocon, war criminal. That's who he always was. Let's get to some of the comments here, but shout out to Code Pink for doing the damn thing. Thank you, Tim, for the super chat. Period. That's Code Pink. Disrupt it all. No peace. What's up? Huey says cops are beating up unarmed grannies. For reals. And you know, I saw this during the BLM protest too. Remember, there was that viral video of the older gentleman in Buffalo where police officers pushed him to the ground and he cracked his head. Remember that guy? Thank you, Tony, Code Pink, and Macklemore. What a show with guests. And thank you, Roger. Medea, Freeport, Long Island, native, my home village. Oh, is she from Freeport? I didn't know that. Thank you, Aspen Falling. Code Pink doing the damn thing. But where are the demands in their shouts? Like Eric T always says, power concedes nothing without a demand. Well, I think the shouts have been, from what videos I've seen, is ceasefire, stop the war, stop funding Israel. I've heard them say that. Thank you, Unemployed Scholar. Code Pink not only bothering Blinken, but disrupting U.S. government's next imperialist move. Note how they were talking about China when Code Pink interrupted them. And thank you, Tim. Blinken is livid. Go drink boba teas. Why y'all care? Thank you, Jay. What an evil bastard. It makes you wonder how much he gets paid from the Israeli lobby. He sickens me. Yeah, Blinken, you ain't got too many friends these days. Thank you, Ronwell. That young girl is so brave for her age. She's a real leader for that against genocide in Gaza. Thank you so much, Ronwell. All right. And now we are moving on to the Bill Maher story. So I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but the past couple of weeks or so, Bill Maher has kind of been on this podcast tour. And he's going on to all these different shows to basically complain about not just what he refers to as the left. We can get into that a little bit later, but also to complain about the protesters, to complain about people who are protesting for Palestinian solidarity and to stop the war in Gaza, right? So he's just been kind of bouncing. And I want to tell you why I feel that this is a problem, because I feel like Bill Maher has basically been made like this voice of reason. We'll start with his appearance on Megyn Kelly's show, and then we'll work our way up to his appearance on The View, because now everybody's trying to make it seem like, oh, Bill Maher's like this voice of reason because he doesn't want to go too far to the left or too far to the right. He's right in the middle. Remember what I always tell you about people who say, let's just stay in the middle? The middle protects the status quo. So here he is on Megyn Kelly. Let's get into this first, and then we'll move on to The View.
So you and I are very similar. I feel like you're kind of a 4 and I'm a 6 on the ideological scale. We have a lot of overlap, but you're definitely still going to vote Democrat, and I'm definitely going to vote Republican. But there's enough commonality to make us shake our heads yes when the other one speaks a lot.
So you're going to vote for Trump?
I am going to vote for Trump, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even understand that. And I understand that Biden is deeply flawed, but he does believe in our way of life. And, I was the one who was saying from the very beginning, when everyone was laughing at me, that Donald Trump will never give up power. And he didn't. He still hasn't conceded the last election. I don't know what could possibly be more fundamental to you or anyone than you have to concede elections. And he hasn't conceded the last one. He's plainly not going to concede this one. He now has all of his sycophants around him parroting his party line, which is when they ask them, will you abide by the election results? Yes, if it's a free and fair election, which is another way of saying if we win. You really think this is a place this country should be?
I'm not going to defend.
So that's Bill Maher actually trying to mislead people. Remember, we covered this before on the show, that quote was actually taken out of context. And listen, I'm no Trump supporter at all, but that quote was actually taken out of context. He was speaking at an auto workers rally, and he was talking to the auto workers like, look, we're going to be in a lot of big trouble if Joe Biden wins again. So notice how he was just, again, he's just repeating narratives from mainstream media, because again, the reality is people look at Bill Maher and they say, well, he's just a comedian. But the reality is Bill Maher is status quo. He's not just a comedian. He's a status quo millionaire that protects the establishment because he is a part of it. So we have to stop with the whole, he's just, people kill me with that. He's just a comedian. He's a fucking millionaire. He's a millionaire, you guys. He's a millionaire who's writing books and is going on to all these different shows, lying on protesters, lying about what the left really means or what it means to be left. This is not someone that we should align ourselves with. This is not someone that we should applaud. Bill Maher is there to protect himself, his wealth, and his status. That's what he's there for.
I mean, the left was very different. Now, of course, the right got way worse also. We won't go back into, they don't believe in democracy. We just had that discussion, but that certainly is way worse in my view. But the left, yes, went off the deep end also in their own way. And so what I always tell people who are Democrats and liberals is, you don't have to lecture me about Donald Trump. I'm the one who was sounding the alarm bells before anybody. But I also get why people vote for him. I absolutely do. Because the stuff that, for example, you just said penises in the swimming pool, and the stuff that is threatening to people that comes from the left is so much more in their everyday life. It's not vague. Like to most people, what's Trump and democracy? It's a vague thought. And Ukraine, that's very far away. Was it impeachable? Who knows? But I know about my kid coming home from school and saying, well, they're telling me I can't tell you.
Yeah.
If I change my sex.
Or saying, as we discussed on your show when I was a guest, suggesting to your perfectly normal son that he might be a girl. At my boys' school, they kept asking them over and over, raise your hand. Well, where are you on the scale of girl to boy, 0 through 5?
I did an editorial only like 3 weeks ago, and I used the word entrapment. I mean, it was about comparing what goes on in the schools with entrapment. I don't think anybody had ever put it that way. But entrapment in the law, I'm sure you know this better than I do, means suggesting someone into a crime.
Yep.
Something they wouldn't have thought of to do anyway. I mean,
so now he's a lawyer all of a sudden. Listen to this. Oz the Boomer says, Bill Maher has a net worth of $180 million as of 2024. Jesse, I sent you a message in the private chat. I mean, about 10 minutes. Okay. Sorry. That's Jesse in the background. Bill Maher has a net worth of $180 million. Most of us, I'm pretty sure most of you watching, we are not in the same class as Bill Maher. We're just not. So when Bill Maher goes onto all these shows and he criticizes all these different groups, and we're going to get to what he's saying about the protesters in just a second, you got to remember who he's trying to protect and who he's speaking for. He's speaking for his class. And Bill Maher is upset and frantic about the protesters and all this stuff because Bill Maher doesn't want he's afraid, they're out there destroying properties. He's afraid someone's going to destroy his property. Even though he's worth over $180 million. There's a sort of selfishness when you become, with some of these celebrities, there is a sense of selfishness that they develop over time. And it seems to increase as their salary increase. It's like the more money that they make, the more selfish they become and the more paranoid they become. We'll go on a little bit more here, and then we're going to get to the protesters.
And I used the example of after 9/11, there were a number of cases where law enforcement basically entrapped people who were not really going to be terrorists. The one case I mentioned was the Liberty Seven guys in Liberty City, Miami, a poor section of Miami. And they basically went to them and said, you know, wouldn't it be cool if you blew up the Sears Tower in Chicago and taught the man a lesson? And these guys who didn't even have a gun, probably the only guys in the neighborhood who didn't have a gun, said, yeah, that would be pretty.
Do this thing.
That would be pretty cool. That's entrapment. And I was saying, look, when you constantly talk to little kids about sex and gender and constantly put out the idea that maybe the body you're in is not the correct one, aligning with what's in your mind, that's entrapment. That to me is the same thing. You're suggesting them into something they wouldn't have thought of anyway, because I promise you, when I was a kid, it never crossed my mind.
So let me just say something here about this issue, and then we're going to go to the protester one. Does Bill Maher have children? No. But he claims to know so much about this issue. People ask me, well, Sabs, how come you don't talk about this issue, what they're saying to the kids in the schools in reference to gender? Because I don't have children. And people say, well, your kids have children, your friends have children. They're not my kids. And none of my friends have said anything about this to me in reference to the way that he's saying it. I haven't heard any of this from my friends, but I don't have children. And neither does Bill Maher. But he claims to know so much about what's being said to the kids in the schools. Really, Bill? How do you know? You don't even have kids. And if he had kids, his kids will probably have children, so he would have grandkids. He don't have no kids. So what you talking about? Now listen to what he says about the protesters.
You're marching for Hamas. Do you know that there are no equal rights for women as regards almost everything you can imagine? Speech, voting, free movement, divorce, property rights, freedom from sexual harassment, freedom from sexual violence. I mean, every possible thing that is a left-wing cause, they violate. But
so do you see what he just did there? He basically smeared. Listen, let me tell you what he did. So he basically said that Hamas is doing all of those things, that they're, assaulting women, all those things that he just said there, right? What was interesting, though, is one of the examples that he brought up was divorce, right? Aren't there certain religions in the United States that actually disapprove of divorce as well? I had a friend whose parents were excommunicated from the Catholic Church because they got divorced. That didn't happen in Gaza. That happened here in the United States. But here he is. He's another one, smearing the protesters. They're out there marching for Hamas. They are marching for the Palestinian people. Bill Maher, another one, Zionist. Defend Israel at all cost.
Those are the people we want in charge. Those are the people we want to control from the river to the sea. Even the people, of course, under the rule of Hamas hate them. It's a fascist dictatorship.
Yeah.
It's a fascist dictator. It's worse. It's a fascist dictatorship with a hard right religious bent.
Mm-hmm.
So can't we say the same thing about the state of Israel? Can't we say that Israel is hard right? Isn't Netanyahu's government hard right? And some would say that the other administrators that are a part of Netanyahu's cabinet are further to the right than he is. Okay, but notice that he doesn't mention that about Israel. Everybody see this? He said, are those the people that you want to have control from the river to the sea? But it's okay for Israel to have control from the river to the sea? They're far right. What about the reports that have been, the stories that have been reported about Palestinian women and children that have been assaulted by IDF soldiers? So why is Bill Maher only trying to make it seem like, oh, when it comes to assault, we call it SA on here. When it comes to SA, that only happens from Hamas. That never happens in Israel. That doesn't happen from the IDF. He's another one just out here to paint that narrative. Bill Maher knows who signs his checks. Bill Maher knows what's going on. Bill Maher knows that if he were to come out and speak out against Israel, there may be some doors that are closed in his face in the entertainment business as well, just like it has been for others. We'll go on a little bit more.
It's like the worst of all worlds. Well, and those are your heroes.
That's right. And they're out there. I mean, it's gone beyond. Of course, they were praising, as you know, on TikTok, the bin Laden letter and doing the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day. These are people who are, probably in Catholic Mass for most of their formative years or Christian Mass. Now they're down on the prayer rug, having absolutely no idea. If you move to one of those countries where that's practiced in the Middle East, they're going to mutilate your genitals. You'll say goodbye to sexual pleasure because that's what the people you're praying to push.
That is such a lie. That's such a lie here by Megyn Kelly. But you know what they're actually doing, right? They're speaking out against Islam. This is not just about Hamas. You guys got to pay attention. They're speaking out against Islam. Think about what she just said. This is a blatant lie. What is she talking about? Right? So Bill Maher goes along with that. And Bill Maher goes along with these statements on The View as well. Now, this was really interesting. Now, I will say he was actually challenged on The View. There was some pushback. I was surprised by this. So this was actually on Counterpoints. Check this out. So Bill Maher goes on to The View. Same issue.
Well, I had a different question, but it struck me that in the first segment you used the term woke, and you said that woke is what was sort of ruining everything. And I know that you're...
No, I didn't say ruining everything. I said that's why Trump could get reelected.
That's why Trump could get reelected. Yeah. So the term woke has been, in my view, co-opted by the right and weaponized and bastardized. And
let me pause for a second. Trump can be reelected because of the economy. So you see how people try to bring in the culture war into this? Trump can be reelected simply because of the economy and the economy alone. When you look at the polls show you the number one issue for voters is the economy, not the wokey woke, which is what Bill Maher just said on The View. Are there people who have complained about that? Absolutely. But that is not the number one issue that voters are concerned about. It is the economy. The polls show you that.
I was surprised to hear you use the term because historically, as you know, because I think you're quite brilliant, that woke is a word used by the Black community to note that we must be aware of social injustices.
But words migrate.
So why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing, and originally that was absolutely a great thing. Alert to injustice, who's not for that? But words do migrate. Now, I'll use any term you want. Okay. Because maybe that is a word that's triggering, and so let's not use that word. I don't know, want to call it the super far left, but don't tell me the left.
Or maybe the super far right.
Well, he's talking about the left. Well, then
okay, but we talked about that. I mean, I think we agree about the danger of the super far right, and I can't say it enough. I think they're the bigger threat. But don't tell me that the left hasn't changed. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was the conservatives who hated the Jews.
Yeah.
So you see what he's doing? So now he's saying that the left despises Jewish people. So he's trying to lump Zionism in with Jewish people, where these are actually obviously two different things. Also, the left is not the Democratic Party. This is another thing that I feel like Bill Maher gets wrong, and I feel like he gets it wrong on purpose. But do you see how he just said that there on The View? None of these people that are out there protesting despise Jewish people. In fact, a lot of the protesters are Jewish, but Bill Maher leaves that out.
Okay. That was a joke. But,
$2. dark, too dark.
Well, maybe it is, but it's true. I mean, if I had any doubt that I was right about the change that's happened in the left, watching people protest for a terrorist organization like Hamas, that straightened me up pretty quick.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about.
So you see this terrorist organization like Hamas, that straightened him up really quick. I think money straightened him up.
That because I think you're almost a free speech absolutist. You believe totally in the right to say what you believe. But I think a lot of us were disturbed to see terrorist flags being waved on American college campuses and seeing this a generation that some I think genuinely care about the plight of the Palestinians. I think most Americans do. But some who seem to be embracing a terrorist organization over the nation of Israel. What do you make of this moment? What do you think it's a result of? How do we fix it?
Well,
Israel is the terrorist. Israel is the occupier. Israel is the oppressor.
I mean, it's just astounding to me that they can't tell the good guys from the bad guys. I mean, just.
See, here we go. See, again, you see what he's doing? So he's trying to convince people that Israel is the good guy.
Morally. I mean, let me tell you, if you're for Hamas, just live in Gaza for a day. And I'm not talking about while the war is on. I mean, before the war. Trust me, you would go running and screaming and begging to live in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm. Do you live in Gaza? Has he ever lived in Gaza? You see the problem here, folks? The people that live in Gaza cannot leave Gaza. The people that live in Gaza are occupied. They are fenced in. This is the dumbest statement. And he made this on The View, and all of them just sit there like they have no freaking clue what he just said and how dangerous that can be. You are giving people the impression that the Palestinians in Gaza always had freedom of movement, that they were free to open the gate and leave. These people were never free to leave. So that is a dangerous statement that he makes there. And no one corrects it.
A place that has your values. I mean, this is a show watched by a lot of women. Women have no rights in this place and a lot of majority Muslim countries around the world. I mean, there is no equal rights as far as speech, dress, opportunities for education.
Nothing.
Let me pause. I'm sorry. This is false. First of all, when we talk about women, we talk about Palestinian women. First of all, there are Palestinian Jews, there are Palestinian Christians, and there are Palestinians that are Muslims. Not all Palestinians practice Islam. In Gaza, the hijab is not required. Not all of the Palestinian women in Gaza wear hijab. What is he talking about? So this is terrible. Absolutely terrible, folks. But he's been on this podcast tour, going on to all these different shows, spreading these lies. And not one person on the panel is intelligent enough or capable enough to push back on this and say that he is telling lies. Not one.
Reproductive rights, freedom from sexual violence, freedom from sexual harassment.
The LGBTQ community.
Yes. You that too. But you throw around the term apartheid. There is a gender apartheid in a lot of the world where women are second-class citizens at best.
Are you at all concerned about the innocent civilians that have been collectively punished and murdered, largely children and women? And are you at all concerned about the fact that the International Criminal Court just today issued a subpoena for Bibi Netanyahu?
Well, that's ridiculous, but it's a war.
Why?
It's a war because it's a war, and they were attacked, and they're defending themselves.
Okay. Well, we'll just go ahead and pause that there. But one thing I want to say, no, we need to correct this. How is Israel still defending itself? How are you defending yourself against babies in a hospital? So, no, I don't want to hear that. The problem that I have with Bill Maher, and people forget about this, and I'll sum up the segment with this. The problem that I have with Bill Maher is that all of a sudden he seems to be this voice of reason. He's going on to all these different shows. Okay. Bill Maher is talking about the women don't have rights in Gaza, etc. Bill Maher is talking about, oh, well, they're not free from, SA and in Gaza, etc. where we have articles and stories of the IDF, of Israeli soldiers assaulting not only women, but children and other women in the IDF, where there's actual articles about that. So he's out here to paint this narrative that these things don't happen in Israel. That is an absolute lie. Israel is now the place where pedos flock to live freely in Israel. CNN did a whole report about this, but they want you to believe that all the Muslim people are a problem. LGBTQ community cannot get married in Israel. So stop it with the whole LGBTQ this, LGBTQ that. Interfaith marriage is not possible in Israel. So stop it with all of that. But I want you to remember who Bill Maher was, because people tend to forget, but I did not. I did not. You see, this is the problem that I have with Bill Maher. Bill Maher, sorry for use of the N-word, as HBO calls it, inexcusable and tasteless. I just want to remind everyone that Bill Maher used the N-word on his HBO show, and he used the ER. Now, why would Bill Maher think that it was okay for him to do that? Because somewhere along the way, people let Bill Maher get a little bit too comfortable. That's why. So who is Bill Maher to sit up there? And yes, he apologized later, but that was because he got the backlash for it. He still felt like he was free to say that and that it wouldn't be problematic. And that's because some people somewhere in the industry let him believe it would be okay for him to say that. That's another story for another day. But the thing is this. Bill Maher has no right now to talk about anybody else and their issues, whether it's gender, race, etc. No right to talk about the protesters, the kids out there protesting for the Palestinian people. And here you were on HBO using the N-word on your show. So don't even. Some people forget. I didn't forget. It wasn't that long ago. And that's who they consider to be the voice of reason. Jesse, you ready? All right. Sorry, Jesse. All right, guys. Jesse Jet, I want you guys to meet the guy who made the theme song, the song that you guys like so much, the Doobie Doobie Doo. Jesse made that song. Come on in, Jesse.
How's it going?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Man, you got me all fired up. I know if I had my lighter up this last segment, I love when you go off, but man, especially on Bill Maher, I could listen to you just ream him for days. So thank you for that. That was beautiful.
Yeah, guys. So for people who don't know, Jesse Jet is a part of Indie News Network, but he is also a musician. Right? Don't be shy.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to do a few themes for people as well as you. I did Tara Reid's theme song, who is a member of Indie News Network as well. Yeah, we do a show every other Tuesday. That's usually just me kind of playing my jams. But people always ask me, political stuff's pretty heavy. Do you have any happy songs? I'm like, Doobie Doobie Doo. That's my happy song. I'm going to coast on that one for a few years and focus on the heavy political content. But Doobie Doobie Doo, that's what I can hang my hat on. I love it.
That's right, but Jesse, you have so can you do a spoken word?
I would love to. Yeah, you really set it up well. Anyone that's willing to carry the torch for what Israel is doing right now and try to justify it, I have a hard time with. But we both know someone who was a very ardent RFK Jr. supporter, who, when he started making missteps, just chose to double down. Some people want to keep doubling down with them. And I wanted to do a piece about him through the eyes of someone who refused to step away, no matter how much of a nosedive he went into. And that led to this piece. Yeah, this is a spoken word piece called Pull String.
Pass the mic. Here we go.
Her hands are bound behind her candidate, who found the perfect hill on which to lay it down for good, who she might not agree with on apartheid or celebrating war crimes, but talks just like she could. He's got the IDF's back and the CIA's back like a Democrat should. Mr. Anti-Establishment didn't start the fire, but he's slipping on his hood. Her voice is grafted to a candidate who might not always speak for her, but what is she to say? Why bother harping on an issue that Americans won't listen to? It seems like such a waste. But what activism is saying they don't give a shit, but if I don't, why would they? So way to rob yourself of agency, then chain yourself to genocide and look the other way. So I love to see a fellow running as a Democrat, then taking stacks of money from a GOP super PAC, calling out corruption in the giant fucking country club he's clearly been accepted at, but wants to be the leader of. He knows which way the money runs, knows it paves a leader's path, and human rights for Palestine historically don't lead to that, so he will not address it, as he doesn't see a need for that. Now, welcome to the attitude our country's politicians have displayed toward Palestinians since back before they cracked the will of Arafat. And so it goes forever after. We do not speak the P word here or recognize the Nakba. All you'll find are sea lions who volunteered as actors, barking like a manuscript from NAFTA. All you'll find are insulated sycophants intent on justifying why the slaughter done in Palestine is not a voting matter. Tell that to Shireen Abu Akleh. Tell that to the children growing up inside a city where the walls are made of shackles. Tell that to a mother who is burying her baby, how her son is not our problem because we'll never see his grave. He's just a topic we can mute, or we can scroll right past his face and all those videos of mourners being beaten at his wake. So stuff your poll on what the average voter deems as urgent. They don't get to know the half of what we use as our detergent when we launder all our ISIS cells, our cartels and insurgents. We do not elect the man behind the curtain. We elect the pull string diversion. We elect the lesser evil donors pre-selected, best to do unto the Arabs as we did unto the Persians, and do unto the Muslims as instructed by the merchant who provided you with HIMARS that can vaporize a person. Back into the dust in which we all will find immersion. One arms dealer's Jenin is another dealer's curse on. Both are just a mark that Lockheed Martin smells a purse on. And voters are the hollow thralls that Congress put a curse on to vote against their interests every 4 years till they die. And if you show them Palestine, cry better them than I. Though the curse of occupation's taken place within their mind, they will always love their prison, long as they are shown the sky. They will sing about their freedoms under Apple's watchful eye as puppets dance and sing should you so pull their strings and wires. And they will rally round a man who bears a torch and bears it high and believe him when he tells them that he's here to stop the fire. We are cursed to love our prison and keep lifting up our liars. We are not behind the wheel. We're being crushed beneath the tires. And our blood is in the oil and the plastic on the wipers. And our blood is on the hands of those who cranked inflation higher. And blood is on a vest where press can barely be deciphered. Put there by a few Israeli snipers who were aiming at the center mass of truth about American desires. That you can sell us any story. We're a nation built of buyers, and we love a good parade. It always makes us feel inspired, like who cares that those were Nazis? Gosh, they had the whitest smiles. So I wouldn't bank on sequels to the Nuremberg trials. If they happen now, they would be confidential, Pfizer style. Redacted paragraphs and empty vials, close to 80 years before they share their files. Well, luckily, your lesser evil logic lets you justify the nations we've defiled. Lesser evil logic lets you cast a vote for someone that you know is truly vile. Lesser evil logic sees another million bodies thrown upon its hoarder's pile, extending out for miles. So every line I've had to scrap, I've turned back into bile. So don't you touch that dial, lest the feds come swarm your door. I guess it isn't safe to say things like, I don't support the war. Or may Palestine know freedom from the Jordan to its shores. Or I'd love to see our senators get trampled by the poor. Any pull-string dem will tell what they're allowed to stand up for and how little things like Palestine are better off ignored. You can call it voter outreach for some desperate remoras when the shark from which they get their scraps starts pulling on the floor. And the shark says those who live beneath a brutal occupation should be thankful for their freedoms and their rubble and their gore. And I swear, it only makes those bottom feeders love him more. One, in particular, is beaming for her candidate, who found that perfect hill on which to make his final stand. She will not be deterred by all those pesky little war crimes, will not be deterred by his support for stolen land. He helps her come to terms with how to spin an occupation. Forgiving the oppressor is the democratic way. She says her voice is grafted to the candidate who speaks for her. And every time you pull her string, she's nothing new to say. And that's pull string.
That is bass, Jesse.
Thank you.
Bass.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Seriously. Thank you.
So don't you also do the song for Hardlands Media?
Yeah. So Kit plays a lot of my stuff, which I shout out to Kit, because I've had a lot of people get a hold of me and be like, "Hey, I found you through Hardlands and heard your stuff there." So yeah, if we have time, I'd love to do. This is one that Kit plays an awful lot. And this is one of my first times with a brand new guitar that an awful lot of people that watch the show and support my music helped make happen. My last one was in splinters, and this is, I'm still in shock over this. So big thanks and much love to everyone that helped make this happen, because I don't know what I would do without you guys.
All right.
So, without further ado, this is called Depop Culture.
Grab a lighter, folks.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, safe. You safe. I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, well, you were safe. Oh, you were safe. Fresh off the masses, the brand new cancerous growth, who has come here to vie for your vote. Come here to cry at the camps and to mourn at the shore for the bodies that float by the wreck of an immigrant boat. Then it's back to their luxury home, couple security booths and a moat, couple cigars, little escargot, little booze and a soap. And they just breathe in the steam and the smoke. They got pink salt, lavender, candles are low. Shit, when you do what you do, got a light in the load, and he got a life of his own that's a sight to behold. It's a lot to control, to decipher the code or to siphon the soul. See, the cost of a good night's sleep for the working elite is a bargain, no matter the toll. It's worth any wager, and that comes straight from the mouth of the means to the goal that will swallow us whole. Ripe for the picking if you don't mind mold, and you know I don't. Maybe we're pleasantly prone, maybe we're taking a licking, compliantly ticking and ticking and ticking, but never explode. No, I don't deliver the prettiest image, but damn if it isn't an accurate vision, a natural fission of rage at the system and abject heartbreak, patiently waiting for any who'll listen. That little blue bird who is watching your words is a federal carrier pigeon, a Langley first. It's a patient observer who hears what it wants and is trained for the worst. Oh, you got nothing to hide? They'll be the ones to decide that After they root through your purse, after they read all your texts, after they raid your apartment and confiscate all of its contents, conjure up evidence out of the air on a wing and a prayer and malicious intelligence nonsense. Any presumption of innocence long since gone, right along with your comforts and constants. Now historically first they will come for the communists. So why in the fuck would I say I'm a communist? Well, it might be I love my community more than the monsters of opulence who are holding us hostage, who are vomiting promises. Might be I'm all done seeing our pensions and benefits harvested. Might be I'm all done watching the populace being disarmed in the guise of an armistice. Watching a woman collapse on the floor who will rise no more. She gets wheeled out the door and you're next in line for the pharmacist. If you could get me to vote, it's a hard no confidence. But part of the charm of deception is politics wearing the mask of incompetence. See, it's all in the art of austerity, darling. It's all in the slide of the providence. Until home is as wide as your cubicle height and only as deep as your coffin is. Now maybe I'm miles away from impatient, aching to break off the head of the snake where the capital lust, reptile brain, and margin of profit is. Like off with his. Like off with his. I guess this isn't such an awful place. Not what you want me to say. You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, you save. And that's deep pop culture.
Bass, Jesse. I love that song. I love it. I always hear it on Hard Lens, and I'm always like, oh, I love that. That's a good one. That's a really good.
Thank you.
I mean,
Seriously, thank you.
I think a lot of people were like, tell him to play that song.
Oh, that's awesome. And, you know, again, when I started writing these songs, the fact that there was anyone that felt what I do and could connect to me really saying whatever I wanted to say about, you know, politics and the state that we're in, to get to this point now and get to have people that will hang out with me late on a Tuesday night and listen to me, you know, rant about this stuff and sing about this. It really does mean the world. I've never felt so fulfilled as a musician as I have in the last few years, like finding my people, you know. It's yeah, for all the horrible stuff going on in the world, I really have like found people that I know I'll be, you know, really close with my whole life. And it's a whole bunch of them are in chat right now, so I love you guys.
That's right. No, it's based. I remember when you did the March for Medicare for All song with Awkward. That was also based.
Thank you.
I remember when you wrote the song about the squad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember back then, some people were still like, I don't know, AOC's I think she's one of us. And now, luckily, most of us have moved past that, thankfully. It took a lot to get there, but we got there.
That's right. But where can people find your music? I think a lot of people know you're on Indie News Network, and Indie Left is in the chat. But where can people find are you on Spotify?
I am. My stuff is on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, all that. Everything is also on Bandcamp. It's jessiejet.bandcamp.com, and everything is free to download. All my music is free. Like if people want to, you know, give me $5 or $1 or whatever you want to, you can, but it's all free to download. So
awesome. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Anytime. This was a blast. Seriously. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Yeah, Jesse's based, man. I told you guys. I've never been on Bandcamp. I usually use Spotify, but if you guys don't have Spotify, he said also iTunes and Bandcamp. Yes, Tim, last name Jet, Jesse Jet. But he's also on Indie News Network. So Indie Left, he should be in the chat. I thought he was in the chat. Yeah, Indie Left. Indy's in the chat. He's on Indie News Network too. So you can find him on Indie News also singing as well. But yeah, pretty based. Yeah. I know someone in the chat said, oh, so he can really, really sing. Yes, he can sing. He can sing. Thank you, Penny. Reuters showed funeral live as CNN denied it below. Interesting. Thank you, Tony. I am a white male soldier. I flip a coin live for what I went to war for, or commit. We can't say that on here, but on commit, I know what you mean. For USA live lies. Don't do either of that. I would say don't do either of that. I hope you're okay, Tony. JB says Bill is stereotyping Palestinians. Bill Maher is a bigot. Yeah, he's always been a clown though. Like I never really thought this dude was funny. I don't know why people thought he was. Thank you, Brock. It's obvious AIPAC has Bill Maher on a tour to promoting Israel by smearing protesters as Hamas. The narrative is failing despite all the BS. Thank you for the super sticker, Felina. And thank you, Tony. I know 51% of women vote, but us men agree with you, but are too fragile. Interesting. What's up, Charlie? Shout out to Charlie Mack. Thank you for the super chat. Charlie says Jesse Jet. Yeah, Charlie knows Jesse as well. Thank you, Aspen Fallen. JJ, our outlaw lumberjack music man. Thank you for this, Felina. For Green Party press correspondence or speaker, I added your name for our nominating convention with Margaret Kimberly weekend before DNC in August, FYI. Felina, can you please email me? Please just email me because so I remember what's happening here. Okay. Thank you for super. I know Margaret's really base, so whatever it is, it sounds like it's going to be really great if Margaret's involved. I will say that. Thank you for this. Tony as well says excellent. Thank you, Tim. Come on, Jesse. Doobie doobie doo. Based. Love it. Yeah, that's the doobie doobie. So everybody asked like who made that song? Jesse made that song. And the Tory said, I hope at the end he does the song when you say the one that is on Hardlands Media that Kit be playing. Yeah, I love that song. Thank you for this, Roger. Snap, 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 snap. Thank you, Paula. Sabby, who are you voting for? Will you do interview? I think everyone knows who I'm voting for. I think it's pretty obvious. We as a group, myself and those of us at RBN, we've decided not to endorse anyone, at least not at this time. But I think you guys know who I'm voting for. Thank you, Penny. Dr. Rafat Al-Arier's M&F students, family, and colleagues loved him. Male and female students, family and colleagues loved him. Gaza had a free uni. Reuters aired Iran funeral live while CNN denied it. Delilah, I'm 70. Jesse reminds me of another singer when he was young, Cat Stevens. And that's a compliment, Jesse. Yeah, I think, didn't Cat Stevens change his name? I think Cat Stevens converted to Islam and changed his name. I have to look up what his new name is now, but I think that happened with Cat Stevens. Is that the cat in the cradle? Is that the cat in the cradle and the silver spoon? Little boy, is that Cat Stevens? Oh no, is it he's Baby, It's a Wild World? Ooh, baby, it's a wild world. I could be all wrong. I don't know. Bryce says Boston is up 104.86. What's up, fam? Let's go. Let's go. All right. Thank you, Tony. I know, like you, every U.S. politician is waiting for. Shout out to Pamela DeMay for becoming a Sabby member. Give Pamela a big whoop, whoop. And shout out to Old Crow says, bars on bars. This is so dope. Thank you for the super sticker, Pamela. And thank you, Aspen Fallen. Is Jesse's fund for a new laptop still up? Link ? I'm not sure. But I can ask him. I can DM him and ask him that, and then I can mention it tomorrow night. I'll be here live tomorrow night. Shout out to James for the super sticker. What's up? Thank you, Unemployed Scholar. Have you seen the video of some Israelis in blackface dressed as an African tribe? I saw that video. Maher saying the N word with the hard ER is typical for Zionists. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I'm sorry. Like, I don't like this whole Bill Maher is the voice of reason thing. It's a hot mess. And shout out to Bryce. Now, Bryce says, all snaps. Thanks. Okay, let's get the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Yay. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin Hemp Car. Last I recall, the biggest human gathering in human history was Kimona's funeral. In the Guinness Book of Records, 80% is how much disapprove of Congress here. Projection. I guess to Morgan, the tribes that wear less clothes than us can kill us because we're oppressed. Piers is such an ass. All right, guys, I am pressed a little bit more for time tonight, but tomorrow night, I will have plenty of time to do this. Tomorrow night, we are going to finish the Louisiana ballot measures, and then we're going to move on to the next state. We're getting closer and closer to June and July, so we can cover the ballot measures for November 2024. So you will know what is going to be on the ballot for your state. Direct democracy, fam. All right, guys, that is it for me. I definitely went a little bit over my time, but I'm here. I think I missed one. I'm sorry. Oh, shout out to James Starks for becoming a Sabby member. Give James a big whoop, whoop. Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. All right, guys, that's it for me tonight. I'll be back live tomorrow night. This weekend, though, is Memorial Weekend. So typically Sunday, this would be my Sunday to go live, but I have plans for Memorial Weekend. So I'll be live tomorrow night and then again on Tuesday night. All right. All right, guys, have a good night. Keep up the fight.